22 boys were placed inside a perfect summer, 11 years old. 2 buses, 2 cabins, a lake, 3 weeks in the Oklahoma hills. Every one of them had been handpicked, screened for months. Stable homes, good grades, no history of trouble of any kind. That was the rule. Only the most ordinary, well-adjusted boys in the state. Nothing broken in a single one of them. 3 weeks later, they were burning each other's flags, raiding each other's cabins in the dark, and filling socks with rocks for a fight the staff barely stopped in time. And here is the detail that should bother you. The staff watched almost all of it happen and wrote it down. Because the counselors weren't counselors. They were scientists. The camp was a laboratory. The boys were the subjects, and the war was the experiment. This is Robber's Cave, named, fittingly, after a canyon where outlaws used to hide. It became one of the most famous experiments in the history of psychology. 70 years in every textbook, as proof of how little it takes to turn ordinary people into enemies. But the version in the textbook is missing a summer. The first time the man behind it tried to build a war, and failed. The summer he buried so completely that it stayed hidden for 60 years. And once you know what happened that first summer, the most famous experiment about hatred stops being about the boys at all. The man holding the clipboard was a psychologist named Muzafer Sharif. He had grown up in Turkey, and as a young man he had watched, up close, ordinary neighbors turn on each other along ethnic lines and kill. He spent the rest of his life chasing one question, the way Calhoun chased his mice. How little does it take? Does hatred need a real reason, land, history, revenge, or does it need almost nothing at all? He had a theory that frightened even him. 2 groups. One prize, only one of them can win. That's it. That's the whole recipe. So he built a summer camp to prove it. 2 buses arrive on different days, at opposite ends of the park. 11 boys on each. Neither group knows the other one exists. For the first week, Sheriff does nothing but watch them become a tribe, and it happens on its own. Each group invents a name for itself. One becomes the Rattlers, the other the Eagles. They make flags. A leader rises in each camp. They carve out a favorite swimming hole, invent private jokes, settle on their own way of doing things. 11 strangers, in a few days, knit themselves into a people. And then, near the end of that first week, the Rattlers hear something across the park. Voices. On what they have already decided is their baseball field. That is all it takes. Before the 2 groups have laid eyes on each other, before one word has passed between them, the Rattlers are calling the strangers those guys and demanding to challenge them. They want territory defended. They have an enemy now. They have never met him. The staff, very helpfully, offers exactly what the boys are asking for. A tournament, baseball, tug-of-war, tent inspections, points tallied each day on a board everyone can see, and a prize for the winners only, a gleaming trophy, medals, and 11 4-bladed pocket knives. The losers get nothing. Watch how fast it goes now, because Sheriff is timing it. The Eagles lose the first game. That night they find the Rattlers' flag on the backstop, and they burn it. The next morning, the Rattlers find the ashes, and a fight nearly breaks out on the field. That night, the Rattlers raid the Eagles' cabin. Beds flipped, belongings thrown. The rival leader's blue jeans stolen, painted with insults, and run up a pole the next day like a captured banner. The Eagles raid back, and now the boys begin to arm themselves. They fill socks with rocks. They hoard green apples as ammunition. They post guards. 2 cabins of 11-year-olds, boys who 2 weeks ago had no reason on earth to know each other's names, are massing for a battle. And this, finally, is the one moment the scientists step in, because someone is about to get badly hurt. The Eagles win the tournament and carry off the knives. That same night, the Rattlers raid their cabin and steal them back. It did not take 3 weeks. From the first distant voices to socks full of rocks, the whole war took about a week. Nobody taught them. Nobody had to. Sheriff had built his war. Now he wanted to know if he could end one. His first idea was the obvious one. Just put them together. Shared meals. A movie. It made things worse. The dining hall turned into a food fight, mashed potatoes and insults across the room. Proximity wasn't peace. It was just a smaller battlefield. So the staff started engineering emergencies that no single group could solve alone. The camp's water supply mysteriously failed, and both tribes had to walk the pipeline up the mountain together to find the break. A truck carrying everyone's food refused to start, and 22 boys had to haul it with a rope. The same rope, as it happened, they'd hauled against each other in the tug-of-war. Sharif had a name for this: superordinate goals, problems too big for one tribe, that forced them to become one. And it worked. By the final night, the Rattlers and Eagles were trading jokes around the same fire. They asked, demanded, to ride home on a single bus. At a rest stop, the Rattlers spent the prize money they'd fought a war over on malted milks for every boy in both groups. Enemies to friends, in less time than it had taken to make them enemies. And that is exactly where your textbook closes the chapter. A tidy, hopeful little parable. Conflict comes easy, but cooperation can heal it. But here is the part almost nobody quotes. 1 year earlier, the summer of 1953, a place called Middle Grove, New York. Same scientist, same blueprint, same carefully screened, perfectly ordinary boys. One difference. This time, the boys arrived and spent their first days together, as one big group, before Sheriff split them in two. They made friends first, and when he divided them, he did it on purpose. He took boys who had become close and put them on opposite teams. Then he started the machine. The same machine. Competitions, prizes, points, the staff quietly stoking friction, and the boys would not catch fire. They kept ending games with good game. They shared their things across the line. So the staff escalated, the way Sheriff's men would later be told to escalate. They snuck in and tore down one group's tent. They cut up a boy's clothes. They stole from one cabin and arranged it to look like the other group had done it. And the boys, 11 years old, did something the experiment never planned for. They investigated. They walked across the camp to the other group and compared notes. And sitting there together, they worked out the truth. The other boys hadn't wrecked their tent. The other boys hadn't cut the clothes. It was the adults. The men running the camp were trying to make them fight. They put the camp on trial. One boy looked at the staff and asked the question that should be printed in every psychology textbook ever written. Maybe you just wanted to see what our reactions would be? The experiment was finished. Sheriff had staked his funding and his name on manufacturing a war, and a handful of sixth graders had seen straight through it and refused. By his own team's account, he was so enraged that one night he had to be physically held back from going after one of his own researchers. He never published Middle Grove. He shut the lid on it and walked away. And the next summer, he rebuilt the whole experiment, start to finish, with exactly one part removed: the friendship. At Robber's Cave, the boys would arrive as strangers. They would bond only inside their own tribe, and they would never, not once, be allowed to know a single boy on the other side before the war began. Read that again. The most famous proof that we are wired for conflict only worked after the scientist went back and deleted the one thing that had beaten him. So yes, 2 flags and 1 trophy can turn strangers into enemies in a week. That part is real. That machine is in you, and it starts faster than you would ever admit. But the buried summer says something stranger. The war machine that psychology has spent 70 years calling human nature lost, to a cabin of 11-year-olds. Not because those boys were kinder than the ones at Robber's Cave, because they knew the other side too well to believe the story they were being sold. When their tent came down in the night, they didn't ask the question the experiment needed them to ask. Which of them did this to us? They asked a different one. Who benefits? Every us and them you have ever been handed came with a tournament bolted to it. A prize? A scoreboard? Someone, somewhere, keeping the points? The Rattlers and the Eagles burned each other's flags for 3 weeks, and not one of them ever turned around to look at the men holding the clipboard. The boys at Middle Grove looked behind the curtain, and the war simply never started. 60 years later, the experiment is still running. Bigger camps, better flags, real knives. And the strangest part isn't that the trick still works on almost everyone. It's that it only ever worked on strangers.